Hi, everybody. Today is, what is it, Sunday, July 26th, I believe. And I'm here in Plattsburgh, New York. My name's John Maiden. What I'm going to read today is it's a petition to Magistrate Michael Halley involving a child support proceeding, but there's much more to it than that. So I'm going to read that petition. What the petition is based on is about 80 some pages of scanned documents that I added. There are attachments A through I and contains rather damning evidence. Kristen Dupree, now Kristen Carnahan, and her demonstrably fraudulent testimony that has been used against me again and again since 2012. So bear with me. I'm going to take my eyes off this. I'm not really good at, how to do these things. I'm trying to record this on my phone so that I make it the most portable when I probably should be doing it on the laptop. But here's the laptop where my petition's written. I have to print it out and save it. I don't have my wireless printer set up yet, but it's about a 13-page document, so bear with me. I am going to upload this to Letitia James. The New York State Attorney General has a whistleblowers website that I am going to take full advantage of. It is supposed to be completely anonymous. You have to download the BitTorrent browser just like you do when you're going on the dark web, so that's pretty cool. Look, I'm just a beat up old Air Force veteran and disabled guy. I've got a lot of problems. I certainly have not been an angel in my life. But this level of corruption and hatred and deliberate actions taken by Kristen and enabled by these various agencies of Clinton County, specifically Timothy Lawless, are damning. Look, let me just say that these past 3 years that I've lived here in Plattsburgh have been specifically hurtful and debilitating for me, because in April 2016 I had life-saving brain surgery and reconstructive jaw surgery. Then 7 months later I had a stage 2 knee replacement and sports hernia surgery. So when I moved up here in April 2017, I hoped that I would just be able to establish visitation with my daughters, but I have been met with such vicious reaction by Timothy Lawless, by Kristen Carnahan, by people defaming me and talking about this thing, which I don't know where it came from. Kristen has been spreading it all around for years, that somehow I broke Elizabeth's arm way back in 2011 when everybody knows what happened. She's been coached. Anyway, there's so much to this, but here's the basic petition. Family Court, State of New York, in the County of Clinton, in the matter of a support proceeding, file number 10590, docket number F-01036-12. I, John Maiden, the petitioner, and CSMS number BT68834K1 against Kristen Carnahan, who is the respondent. I'm asking for help here, specifically in this matter, from Support Magistrate Michael Halley. The last time I was in Magistrate Halley's court, I was in tears just listening to these outrageous lies being told about me by Kristen Carnahan, Ricky Carnahan, Alan Cruikshank, what's the hack's name who is supposed to represent my daughter, Cheryl Haskell or Hanspel or wherever the hell her name is. She stands up and lies right in open court, and I've never had a conversation with this woman in my life. So hopefully this will get the ball rolling with the whistleblower's office. If I put this out there in court, I don't want to end up dead. I don't want to end up in jail. I don't want to end up like my friend Justin Herzog, because I've experienced what Judge Lawless will do to people. He turns the full powers of the Clinton County government, and it's a very integrated. I have lots of documentation. The New York State Police, Andrew Wiley, and the district attorney's office, the Department of Social Services, Child Protective Services. They work hand in glove and cover up for each other. You have to experience this for yourself. Justin Herzog told me about it, warned me about it, told me that I was next, and then a little over a year later, he apparently committed suicide in his office. I don't believe that. There are a lot of people that don't believe anything about Justin Herzog's suicide, and they shouldn't believe anything that's going to happen to me from this point forward. I'm not going to commit suicide, and I've seen The Godfather, so believe me, I'm not going to get on the boat like Fredo and take a ride with any of these knuckleheads. I just want to live. I have 3 little girls. I came up here with the full expectations of being able to start my life over again. Haven't survived all that stuff I just told you about and went through. But it hasn't worked. That's okay. I'm a big boy. I just want to address this now, and I know I'm right and correct, but I have to get this out of the Clinton County government system here. This is an incestuous, corrupt, conspiratorial, very nasty, biased environment to do anything in. I can tell you, and I'm not afraid to drop names, I have friends like Thomas Pickering, who has an office on Court Street, but will not argue family court in front of Judge Lawless out of fear of crossing this man. People go the other way, and there is a lawyer shortage in Clinton County because once you're told about the reputation of this judge, and not just something like, the normal adversarial stuff that we have in our court system, this judge targets people. He takes them out. He took out my neighbor, the pot doctor. He's taken out Justin Herzog. He takes out, oh God, there's a list of people. I found court cases going back to 1992. That's another story. Stay tuned for the book that'll probably come out of this. Anyway, might as well pitch a book, right? Everybody else does. But listen to this, okay? My name, as I said, is John Maiden. And this goes all the way back to 2010. I guess was really the beginning of the end for our family when Kristen Dupree, the mother of my 3 daughters, Elizabeth, who is now 12, Victoria, who's 11, and little Aurelia Jean, who is now 10. When Kristen gave birth to Aurelia at Grandview Hospital in Sellersville, Pennsylvania, she tested positive for marijuana. From that point forward, there has always been this fear. And I think I'm not even going to say, there has always been this fear that I'm going to take the girls away from her. And I've never attempted to do that, but now I am. I want my daughters, because I can't risk this anymore. What the pandemic has shown me in these last 3 years have shown me is that I might not live, through next year. I've got a compromised respiratory system and a compromised immune system from all of my different surgeries and everything like that. So the coronavirus could certainly take me out. But listen to this. To Judge Michael Halley, the support magistrate, I, the undersigned John Maiden, respectfully shows that I am the petitioner in this matter, and I live at 376 Margaret Street in apartment D31 in Plattsburgh, New York. The respondent, Kristen Carnahan, in the above entitled proceeding, resides at 3419 State Route 22 in Peru, New York, and zip code 12972. She's the mother of the children named below, including Elizabeth Maiden, who was born on March 7th, 2008. Her social security number is 189-84-9279. Victoria Maiden, date of birth, June 27th, 2009. Social security number 160869302. And Aurelia Maiden, date of birth, June 27th, 2010. Social security number 178865427. And before you think you just heard something mistakenly, yes, my youngest 2 daughters share the same birthday 1 year apart. Aurelia and Victoria were born on June 27th, 2009 and 2010. The children reside with the respondent, Kristen Carnahan, and her husband, the illustrious Richard Carnahan, at 3419 State Route 22 in Peru, New York. Elizabeth, Victoria, and Aurelia Maiden have been in the physical custody of Kristen Carnahan since she kidnapped them and fled to New York from Pennsylvania back on Easter Sunday in April of 2012. Here's where it gets interesting. While represented by attorney Keith M. Bruno, who was Kristen's family court attorney back in 2012 and is now a Clinton County judge, He has jurisdiction for this in family court, which is an obvious conflict of interest and need for recusal. He shouldn't have to be reminded of this. He is the person who sat there with Kristen and obtained all of these illegal orders, default orders against me back in 2012. So he has to be removed from this. He could probably clear all this up in 2 seconds and say, yeah, Kristen is absolutely guilty of all these things. And if we do the investigation and you see the income tax fraud, as Mr. Maiden has investigated and provided us information about with the IRS and with the New York the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance, you'll then see what the motivation is for all of these false claims against me. I just don't understand. Well, I don't understand a lot of things. I really don't understand what Judge Lawless gets out of this. It has to be that Ivana Mayazek paid him off. It has to be something like that. Otherwise, why would you do this? I just don't get it. But there's a lot of screwed up stuff that Lawless has done. All right. So let's go back to this again. I keep getting sidetracked here. While represented by attorney Keith M. Bruno, who is now a Clinton County judge, an obvious need for recusal due to conflict of interest in this matter, Clinton County Family Court issued a custody order by default in November 2012 using the same fraudulent claims made by Kristen Dupree in the support proceeding. Dupree testified that Elizabeth Victoria and Aurelia Maiden were born and resided in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania continuously from the times of their birth until April 2012, when Dupree kidnapped Elizabeth Victoria and Aurelia and fled Pennsylvania to avoid prosecution for various offenses, including federal and New York State income tax fraud, welfare fraud, insurance fraud, breach of fiduciary trust, forgery, assault and battery of John Maiden, property damage, terroristic threats, disorderly conduct, you name it. In the last 6 months we were together, Kristen was arrested 3 times. She could have been arrested 33 times in that time if I hadn't stepped in and stopped what was going on time and time again and worked with the Penridge Regional Police and tried to talk to the Pennsylvania Department of Probation and Parole, who absolutely wanted me to separate myself from her and take my daughters when I had a protection order against her in 2011, had her out of the house. Look, the biggest mistake I have ever made in all of this is that in November 2011, I was dumb enough to allow Kristen Dupree back into my life and into the lives of my daughters. Since then, I have had hell to pay for that decision. You cannot imagine what I've been through. Listen to this. There are many false claims, perjured testimony regarding tax fraud and contradiction of the findings of fact as they are mentioned in the default order for child support. Now, I asked for a modification of this child support order. I think it was back in 2016, and maybe it was in 2017 into 2018, because I had been through so much in the last few years with all those surgeries and everything and actions taken against me because of problems with probation and parole. The VA stopped paying me and wanted like $30-some thousand back. Now, all of that on top of Kristen leaving me with about $30,000 in household debt and judgments against me from Allstate Insurance because of her insurance frauds, and just destroyed credit because of what she did to my finances for 5 years. Anyway, this is attachment A, which is called Disputing the Findings of Fact. On August 22nd, 2012, Support Magistrate Michael Howley issued an order of support by default based on the findings of fact and the associated sworn testimony of Kristen Dupree, while establishing the validity of Dupree's claims for child support based on paternity and residency established in the home state of Pennsylvania. From 2008 until 2013, Dupree committed federal and New York State income tax fraud by claiming that Elizabeth Maiden, Victoria Maiden, and Aurelia Maiden never lived in Pennsylvania, and that they lived in New York State and were the dependents of either Katie Rock, Kristen's aunt, or Kathy Dupree, Kristen's mother, depending on whom Kristen could make more money with at the time. Each year, Kristen would collect tens of thousands of dollars in federal and New York State income tax refunds and pay a portion to her mother or her aunt Katie, while they fraudulently obtained LIHEAP and other state benefits that you get when you have 3 dependent little girls. I don't know, maybe they even collected food stamps at that time. That needs to be investigated. This has been communicated and never investigated by anybody in New York State. They cover it up and turn everything against me. Here's what I've learned so far, and you can only imagine that as the non-custodial parent, when I start asking questions about tax fraud and abuse of my daughter's identities, there has to be a basis for that. Now, that basis is Kristen's testimony, where she speaks truth. We lived together in Pennsylvania and raised our daughters for 5 good years, in my opinion. But during that time, she was committing multiple frauds at the federal level and at the New York State level. And when I tried to bring this up and when I asked her to stop, that's when all shit hit the fan. It has nothing to do with domestic violence by me. I have the documentation that proves that she is the domestic abuser. We'll get to that later. According to the Albany Office of the Internal Revenue Service Tax Fraud Whistleblowers Unit and the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance, there are multiple irregularities over the years that they have verified using my daughter's identities, including their social security numbers, birth dates, names, and states of residence, and who they were dependents of. It's sickening what Kristen and her family is doing. The findings of fact in the support proceeding, there are specific information about federal and New York State records demonstrate that in direct contradiction to, specifically, federal and New York State records demonstrate that in direct contradiction to Dupree's testimonies and claims of residency for Elizabeth, Victoria, and Aurelia in Pennsylvania, tax records unambiguously identify the ongoing felonies and financial fraud committed by Kristen and her relatives when they conspired and committed identity fraud and tax fraud each year until Maiden threatened to expose this criminal activity in 2012. On April 15th, 2012, Kristen Dupree kidnapped my daughters and fled to New York to avoid prosecution for these crimes, including the federal and New York State income tax fraud, Pennsylvania welfare fraud, insurance fraud, breach of fiduciary trust, forgery, etc., assaulting me, battery, property damage, terroristic threat. It's disgusting. This has all been communicated, not hidden. Kristen's proud of it, that she punched me in the face, and I didn't even retaliate. I never did. With charges pending in Percy, Pennsylvania for disorderly conduct and making more terroristic threats against Maiden, Dupree fled the state of Pennsylvania and found a safe haven in the corrupt, biased, xenophobic world of Timothy Lawless, where false claims made by women gaming the family court system are welcomed, legitimized, and amplified by attorneys like Alan Cruikshank, Edward Meyer, and Christopher Michaud, who routinely falsify claims according to the predetermined outcome desired by Timothy Lawless. When Kristen kidnapped my daughters and fled to New York to avoid those prosecutions, Dupree had been ordered to report by a Bucks County Family Services court order to appear for submitting an adulterated urine specimen at Bucks County Family Services. Kristen knew that if she got in that kind of trouble, I was just going to take the girls from her and she would never see them again, which is why she had to ratchet up this bullshit against me as quickly as she could. Okay, number 4. Dupree made false claims of domestic violence in order to separate Maiden from his 3 young daughters. The court failed to communicate with Bucks County, Pennsylvania, according to the Universal Child Custody Jurisdiction and Enforcement Act, which, if I'm aware, this governs this sort of interstate transfer of children. Certainly Judge Lawless, Keith Bruno, Alan Cruikshank, all of these knuckleheads were well aware, and still they ignored it, and still they act against me. The Clinton County court system ignored all of John Maiden's pleas for his daughter's protection based on the outright lies and misrepresentation of material facts while committing financial fraud on multiple levels by Dupree. Using the identities of my daughters to capitalize on loopholes created by the fact that as a 100% service-connected disabled veteran of the United States Air Force, my income is not taxable. I can combine it with somebody else's, or if I have income from other sources, it then can be additive to then, get the kind of benefits or to get tax refunds, for my daughters. But in itself, it's not taxable. All of this drama was precipitated by Kristen Dupree testing positive for marijuana while giving birth to Aurelia Maiden at Grandview Hospital in Sellersville, Pennsylvania on June 27, 2010. After that day, the woman I once knew and mother of my children ceased to exist. And from November 2011 until April 2012, Kristen was arrested 3 times as her addiction spun out of control. I, John Maiden, was under the direct supervision of Dina Welch and John Smolensky of the Pennsylvania Departments of Probation and Parole at the time, specifically from October 2011 until April 2012, when Dupree became desperate and made fraudulent claims of domestic violence against me. Rest assured, when you're on parole, if the mother of your children and the person that you're sharing a home with makes any verifiable claim of domestic violence against you, you're going straight to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not do any of that. They're not going to talk to you. They don't want to hear anything you have to say. If you present a direct threat to the mother of your children or your children, you're going to jail. And they'll talk to you when your parole's over. 2 years, they'll just let you out. But they're not going to let you out and see if you can be a further threat or do any harm, especially when you're a disabled veteran with the kind of diagnoses that I have. Look, rest assured, if anything that she said would have been true, and all of this is verifiable by documentary evidence with the Pennsylvania Board of Probation and Parole, that New York State with one phone call, they could have verified that all of Kristen Dupree's claims against me were true. By talking to my parole agent, they would have learned so much about this crazy woman who was destroying me and my family at the time, but they couldn't be bothered. Anyway, on July 22nd, 2012, John Maiden filed a child custody petition in Doylestown, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and Kristen Dupree was ordered to report by a Bucks County court order dated July 23, 2012. Now, this precipitating event, when I communicated it to the court at the time, should have stopped or should have been sufficient for Lawless and his accomplices to recognize their errors, take no further action against me, and reverse course in this matter and establish jurisdiction in Pennsylvania according to what is recognized law. I'm not talking about something out of the ordinary here. Kristen's lies about domestic violence could have been identified immediately, and my daughter should have been returned to Pennsylvania because she was fleeing Bucks County about her urine specimens. She was a hopeless addict at the time. God, I hope she's doing better. God knows that my daughters and their 4th daughter depends on it. Anyway, instead things got worse for Maiden when I attempted to identify this stuff and his relationship with his daughters. Lawless has denied me even telephone visitations since 2012. And again, he denied me in 2016 and 2017 to just have simple telephone contact with my daughters while I was laying in a hospital bed in Philadelphia, not knowing if I was going to live or die following brain surgery. Lawless denied Maiden therapeutic visitation with his daughters in 2018 because his paperwork was not up to par, as he represented himself once again being exposed to extreme legal jeopardy, ridicule, verbal humiliation, and future harassment by the New York State Police, Clinton County Sheriff's Department, being pulled over by the city police, seizing my financial assets, defamation, etc. These coordinated accidents don't happen without all of these people being aware. And all you have to do is just pull on one little thread in this shitty, corrupt sweater and the whole thing will unravel. The documentation shows, and it's beyond the scope of this, but believe me, once these people are removed, there'll be plenty of time to examine this stuff, and I'm sure my story is not unique. So here we go. Back to the therapeutic visitation in 2018. I was representing myself in a family court, hoping that I could get therapeutic visitation going, since Family Connections out here in Nancy Buckpit is a joke and really just does a lot of damage to people like me because they work hand in glove with Lawless and people. Lawless won't even allow me to have any visitation with my daughters anywhere else, and acts like I don't know, Family Connection did the right thing. Family Connection was bullied, I think, by Kristen and her mother, who went there and told him some crap about the defamation and me hurting Elizabeth, and then that was used against me. So I have seen my daughters 3 times in 8 years, and there's been a visitation order in place since 2016. Kristen just rolls new orders of protection against me to shut me up and to be used as a sword against me, to stop me from talking about these things. But the time has come that I have to get it out of Clinton County and up to the state level or beyond. Hell, I talked to the FBI about this last summer. I don't think that they can appreciate the level of depraved indifference and outright illegal actions that this place takes up here. They work hand in glove. They look the other way. It's disgusting. Kristen Dupree getting wound up. Kristen Dupree ignored all legal actions from Pennsylvania. She sought protection in Clinton County, New York, from prosecution in Bucks County for all the objectionable behavior over the previous 2 years, while I sought to extricate myself from this toxic relationship with Dupree. But my medical conditions were deteriorating at the time. I mean, I could barely walk across the room by 2014, and that's when I ended up having the total knee replacement at age 54 in 2016. Anyway, let's get this through. I'm going to stop, how should I say, editorializing and just read straight through. Attachment B deals with the default orders that Kristen obtained that were based on identity fraud and tax fraud. Each Clinton County family court order issued by default in 2012 is based on the same fraudulent, contradictory claims made by Dupree while committing federal and New York State income tax fraud. Once again, beginning in July 2012, Dupree filed for a child support order of protection, and a custody order, all by default. And these were enforceable since Kristen was going out of her way to make sure that I was not going to be able to travel to New York, since she was routinely calling my parole agent and saying that I was harassing her by telephone. Another demonstrably false claim, which I have so much documentation for and was ignored by Lawless. Kristen doesn't even have to have any documentation. She walks into court and says whatever she says. Cruikshank runs it up the flagpole, and Lawless gives her an order of protection for another 2 years. When that expires, we're going to threaten Maiden with the custody and visitation order. If he inadvertently has contact with his daughters, we're going to claim that this vicious man who is supposedly a threat to, his public enemy number one somehow, is threatening me and his daughters. Look, I'll say again, Clinton County ignored the standards governing the interstate movement of minor children as specified in the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction and Enforcement Act, which is called the UCCJEA, and began to create a false narrative about me, just like Lawless does with everybody in his courtroom. This goes back to 1992 with a guy whose wife he was screwing around with, that then the guy appeared in front of him, so Lawless wanted to throw him in court for 6 months for failure to pay child support and kept jacking up his child support. Meantime, he's screwing the guy's wife. I mean, come on, this guy, you gotta see. But people are so afraid because they know what I know now, that if you piss this guy off, the New York State Police, the Sheriff's Department, the District Attorney, the City Police are gonna find a way to fuck with you. They're gonna fuck with you at the direction of these people. They'll run you out of town or worse. If you have a big enough stake in it, like the doctor, my neighbor, did, or if you have a big enough stake in it like Justin Herzog did, he won't let up until he either gets you in jail or you're dead, I guess. Anyway, for me, this false narrative against me, a 100% service-connected disabled veteran, seeks to punish me anytime I attempt to assert my parental rights or other civil rights and alienate him from my children. These deliberate illegal actions and prosecutorial misconduct of Timothy Lawless, Keith Bruno, Andrew Wiley, and various Clinton County departments, including social services and child protective services, violate all the basic tenets of family law by failing to perform any of the due diligence associated or necessitated by Kristen Dupree's claims and actions against John Maiden. All they have done is destroy me from the door. They've never looked at any of the documentation that I have provided over and over again. Dupree's sworn testimony in these positions petitions correctly states the birth and residence information for my daughters from 2008 until 2012 as the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. However, in my conversations and documents that I've faxed back and forth over the last few years to the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance, especially when I discovered Kristen's testimony regarding the tax fraud, have all been identified to the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance and is available by court request to verify these crimes. It has never been done. Once the pandemic, this was August 2019. So once the pandemic started, or once I was in court last fall, and I had to sit there and listen to people lie about me for 4 hours at a time in the afternoon, and Judge Howley knew what was going on. Alan Cruikshank was so excited that he thought we were going to get this. He was going to get to use this default order, as is. As soon as he started complaining about this, like 2 hearings ago, and as soon as I remembered that Judge Lawless goes ape shit anytime I start looking at this document, I know that's where he knows his vulnerability is. Look, Lawless knows this testimony is in here and knows it provides damning evidence that proves the criminal activities of Kristen Carnahan associated with all that crap going back all those years. But here's the thing. I guarantee you that Kristen is greedy enough that she did not stop back then with these frauds. If she didn't get exposed, or if she wasn't held accountable for this, she is probably using my daughter's identities to this day to commit these frauds. So this should be investigated. Once again, there is probable cause based on these prior federal crimes and the state level crimes. All right. So, in her sworn testimony in these petitions, it correctly states the birth and residence of my daughters, Elizabeth, Victoria, and Aurelia, from the times of their birth until April 2012 in Pennsylvania with us under the same roof. And this directly contradicts what all the fraudulent income tax returns and refunds got. The damning evidence is at the root of the conspiracy between Kristen Dupree and others to stop me at all costs. They'll do anything to stop from having these crimes exposed, and from people knowing about how corrupt Clinton County is. So, according to the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance, in my last, verified communication with them in August of 2019, there are multiple irregularities with my daughter's identities associated at multiple levels of tax fraud, dependency, New York State, whatever. There's a lot of stuff. I'm a non-custodial parent, so I don't really have access to it. And until they saw that testimony by Kristen, they wouldn't really, give it much credence with me. But now they can see the contradiction. The court has to go get that information. Federal income tax returns from 2008 until 2012 illegally claimed that my daughters were residents of Clinton County, New York, as the dependents of Kathy Dupree or Katie Rock. This contradicts the direct testimony of Kristen Dupree and the findings of fact based on that testimony by the support magistrate Michael Halley in August 2012. In direct contradiction of reality in my life with Kristen and my daughters from 2007 to 2012, we lived together under one roof in Montgomery and Bucks counties at the addresses listed in these attachments and other documents. Dupree's sworn testimony in support court is an affront to the very rule of law in Clinton County, New York, Dupree's sworn testimony in support court is an affront to the very rule of law in Clinton County, New York, while using the court to satisfy her malicious attacks on John Maiden and to alienate Maiden from his daughters. When a court fails to protect children and disabled parents from the willful conduct of a predator like Kristen Dupree and her felonious, heinous, truly objectionable behavior, what remains? The next attachments, C, D, and E. This is maybe, a tenth, maybe not even a tenth of the ex parte communications, petitions, emails, letters, all the different ways that I attempted to communicate with the agencies of Clinton County that were intended, I believe, to protect my daughters, not to prosecute me. I thought that I would be protected, especially as a disabled veteran, especially when I could demonstrate what the crimes that Kristen had been committing for years. But Judge Lawless, I think, is corrupt as fuck, as they say. Since 2012, John Maiden has been illegally prosecuted and denied basic civil and parental rights by the various agencies of Clinton County government that are intended to protect my rights and the rights of my daughters. Beyond the scope of this document, I can't really get into that, but I have mountains of documentation and hundreds of pages that show you these people ignored everything. The deliberate obfuscation of evidence, testimony, and direct communication with various agencies over the past 8 years cannot be dismissed without recognition that this is egregious and beyond the pale of acceptable conduct by the various county and state officials addressed in these communications. Again and again and again, a coordinated, calculated effort has been deployed against John Maiden in flagrant violation of his civil rights. John Maiden has been defamed, falsely prosecuted, convicted, and incarcerated without ever performing the basic diligence required when a whack job like Kristen Dupree makes demonstrably false claims in open court. It takes a highly corrupt system to back that up over the course of 8 years, as I have been in their face time and time again, and they turn it against me. Dupree contradicts in her own court testimony with her own words again and again and again. I have documentation of when we were together, and I'm going to talk about this. This is attachment F. Where is it? Attachment F. You can see in this pretty little letter that Kristen wrote, and this is her signature at the bottom. See where it says Kristen Dupree? That's her signature at the bottom. This letter says, I'm writing this letter on the behalf of John Maiden, my fiance. John is an amazing man and father. In the past 5 years that I have known him, he has overcome many tribulations, from the dissolution of his marriage and loss of a parent to his ever deteriorating and debilitating medical conditions. During these years, I have witnessed John do nothing but strive and successfully overcome every obstacle thrown in his path. I have seen mornings where the pain of John's constant suffering and the stresses of having 2 small children overwhelm him, and his pride diminish him to sobbing in the dark. Despite these relentless pressures, he continues to be the rock that holds our family together, and his positive, upbeat attitude and hopefulness continue to astound me. Medically speaking, John has a laundry list of degenerative problems that will only continue to get worse over time. However disheartening this would be to anyone else, John continues to be optimistic and take care of himself appropriately, whether it be going to doctor's appointments to try and find relief through medicine, including epidural injections in his back, cortisone injections in his knee, high blood pressure medication, addictive narcotic painkillers for attending his psychiatric appointments for mental stability, and sometimes attending AA meetings, therapy sessions with the VA psychiatrist and psychologist named Emily Valentine and Helen Book, who will back up everything that's in here. Again, ignored by the court. During this time when I got in trouble, because I did get in trouble out at the Lebanon VA, it's a hazard of having post-traumatic stress disorder, as I do, and getting into a situation where I get so claustrophobic that I freak out and want to run out of the building. And when you run out of the building with a Wii game console in your hand, and yeah, this has happened to me before, and yes, whatever, I'm not going to get into that. But during the time when this happened, I was under immense pressure from lack of sleep, insanity to go along with the birth of a new child. The morning of this incident, I'd slept approximately 3 hours, driven 2 hours to get to Lebanon, and I was denied access to being seen by a mental health professional, and I had asked to be, admitted to the hospital because things were out of control. My blood pressure was 167 over 115. I had a racing heart rate, migraine, and symptoms of anxiety and distress. They were all ignored. So, it was just par for the course for somebody like me to have to keep enduring this level of indifference by agencies like the VA, and then compounded by creeps like Judge Lawless and people that keep me from seeing my daughters. Kristen goes on to say, I don't know what else to say. For one person, John has so much on his plate to deal with. She says then, and I don't have bipolar disorder, but she says bipolar disorder and medications that really mess him up. A blown out right knee with a torn meniscus that needs to be replaced, 3 disc herniations in his lower back and ligament damage, peroneal nerve damage in his right leg that makes his lower leg a complete loss, and foot drop, scoliosis, and arthritis in his hip. Every day he's just in so much pain. John has several surgeries to consider after umbilical hernia surgery last year. In addition to our 2 young daughters, we're expecting another child in July that precludes John from having his knee replaced anytime soon. He's a good man that gets overwhelmed from time to time by severe pain, medication, lack of sleep, and depression. Now, these other documents in here are just a couple of the emails that Kristen was sending to me back in 2012 while making false claims against me in court, sending emails to me and trying to get me to call her on the phone. She's playing both sides against the middle and constantly lying and playing off one against the other for whatever advantage that she thinks she can get. Now, I have other emails from her with a lot more documentation. In this one, she calls Judge Lawless an asshole. This is in October and November 2012. She calls Judge Lawless an asshole, and I agree with that. I mean, that's the one thing Kristen and I have in common. We do agree that Judge Lawless is an asshole. Again and again, what you see in there is that it's in direct contradiction of everything else she's doing. She's constantly playing me off against the other people. And once I said, no, that's enough, I'm not participating in this, that's when things really got bad for me, and she started making all these false claims about Elizabeth's broken arm and about domestic violence. Before then, and up until that time, there was nothing verifiable about the domestic violence. It was this knucklehead Kristen Dupree from New York. Anyway, here we go. Look, here's a funny thing. When I was working with the New York State Department of, not New York State, the Pennsylvania Department of Probation and Parole and the Penn Ridge Regional Police Department had developed an abbreviation or an acronym to refer to Kristen because she was going off on a daily basis. And I had to take care of three young girls, ages 4, 3, and 2 at the time, while not allowing her to take me down, while she's trying to steal from me and disappearing to go sleep with different men. And I don't want to really put her down, but you can only imagine what she was doing to get cocaine with 2 different men like Kyle Klemmer and Tim Vile. And I've heard some pretty graphic stories from people about what Kristen will do to get cocaine. And it's not pretty, and I'm not proud that that's my mother, and that's the mother of my children, and that's what she'll do to get it. But it's pretty disgusting. Anyway, let's keep going. So anyway, those are emails. In those emails and there's other documentation, it's just more about the lies. The other emails that I have, they provide more damning evidence against Dupree, especially, like I said, about the very first time she ever said anything to me about breaking Elizabeth's arm. I was so hurt and disgusted and anticipated what was coming next that I never tried to contact her again. And it's only gotten worse. Now, here's my conclusions about all this. Well, what can I say? Lawless is either incompetent or corrupt, as the fault orders of protection, custody, and support are issued without ever performing home state verifications or investigating Dupree's claims with Bucks County Family Court and Child Protective Services, the Penn Ridge Regional Police, Grandview Hospital, the Penn Foundation, the Pennsylvania Department of Parole. These are not minor oversights. If you're going to allow a woman to take a child from one state to the other, you have to use the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction and Enforcement Act as the structure. When somebody makes claims of domestic violence, that doesn't mean that you just adopt everything that she says. That means that you investigate the claims. And when the father of the children is a disabled veteran who's coming to you saying, look, this is what's really going on, and you ignore him and then try to do everything in your power to stop him for the next 8 years, incarcerating me for no reason. I've stood there in front of Judge Lawless, and if there weren't $10,000 on the table that Kristen had to take that day, Lawless would have thrown me in jail for 6 months. Then again, with this stuff that went on last fall, when I'm not going to get into, I could tell you again. Anyway, this is the knowing deliberate action of Lawless, defense attorney Keith Bruno, now Judge Keith Bruno, and the Department of Social Services to prevent Maiden from obtaining physical and legal custody of his daughters. They have full knowledge of Dupree's illegal claims, but fail to act appropriately again and again. Is this stupidity, incompetence, or just more corruption and conspiracies? Contemporaneous medical records from Dr. Helen Book and therapist Ellen Valentine of the Coatesville VA Medical Center were my therapists, as well as records from parole agents John Smolensky and Dina Welch, demonstrably proved Maiden never abused Kristen Dupree. Just as these documents illuminate the evil, verifiably false, and objectionable behavior ignored by Lawless, Lawless never bothered to verify anything but his own bias by attacking Maiden again and again and again and denying him access to his daughters, hoping that something would come up so that he could just like that cop Derek Chauvin did with George Floyd. Judge Lawless has been doing. My name is John Maiden and I am George Floyd. Lawless has had his knee on my neck and the neck of my daughters for 8 years, 4 months, and 6 days, and I can't breathe. What more do I need to prove? Again, is Lawless just some bumbling hayseed judge in upstate New York, or is he a biased hack who deliberately destroys people's lives and was paid off by somebody like Ivana Mayazek? Follow the money, for God's sake. Maybe we should ask somebody like Justin Herzog, a trusted attorney who has argued in front of Lawless in the past. However, Justin Herzog isn't around anymore to tell you anything about what Judge Lawless does to people, because he was driven to apparent suicide by this mess that Judge Lawless creates in people's lives. And I don't want to be there. I don't want to die. I don't want to go to jail and die of the coronavirus, so somebody has to stop this guy. What more do I need to prove? The Penn Foundation records are perhaps the most damning evidence, with Kristen in her own words, about all of this. And this is, again, something that I made available to the court, but was ignored by the court in lieu of coming after me and trying to throw me in jail for anything and everything that Lawless could come up with. It's like a 10-page document. During comprehensive assessments in November 2011 for substance abuse, anger management, and the physical assault of John Maiden by Kristen Dupree, the Penn Foundation in Sellersville, Pennsylvania, created a comprehensive treatment plan for Dupree. While abusing cocaine, marijuana, and alcohol on a daily basis, Dupree moved in with drug dealers named Kyle Clemmer and Timothy Vile, using those men to threaten and harass Maiden while abandoning Elizabeth, Victoria, and Aurelia for weeks at a time, sometimes returning to the family home in Telford, Pennsylvania, to terrorize Maiden and to steal his wallet to support her drug habit. All during this time, like I said before, I had to keep the Penn Ridge Regional Police, as well as the Pennsylvania Department of Probation and Parole. I had to stay in communication with them every day because Kristen was doing something crazy. She would be up the street screaming at my neighbor and yelling at people. She'd be out in the middle of, Old Bethlehem Pike, just screaming and